The Book of Enoch, otherwise known as 1 Enoch, is an ancient Hebraic apocalyptic text that is, for the most part, thought to have been written by Enoch, the great-grandfather of Noah. Whilst the text has become commonly overlooked, its unique and compelling material has kept it relevant in the eyes of many believers, not just because of its angels, demons, and giants, but also because of the additional narratives it provides the book of Genesis in regards to the Great Flood and the prophecies of the Messiah. Fragments of the Dead Sea Scrolls indicate that the Book of Enoch was known by the Jews and the early Near Eastern Christians, and we can also gather that Enoch himself was a known person, considering his mentions in the Bible itself. The Book of Enoch, however, is often a point of contention by those who are aware of it, where some Christian groups accept the theological ideas presented by the book, whilst others reject it entirely. The first part of the Book of Enoch is dedicated to the Watchers, the angels who had come to betray God and father the Nephilim through mortal women. Beyond this, the book gives us a compelling look of heaven through the eyes of Enoch himself, he who is guided through each layer in the form of visions and dreams. In this first episode, we'll seek to address the first 5 chapters that detail Enoch's words, those being his foreseeing of the Messiah, his warning to sinners, and the fate that awaits those who do or do not live by the way of God. The very opening of the book tells us, "The words of the blessing of Enoch, wherewith he blessed the elect and righteous, who will be living in the day of tribulation, when all the wicked and godless are to be removed. And he took up his parable and said, Enoch, a righteous man, whose eyes were opened by God, saw the vision of the Holy One in the heavens, which the angels showed me, and from them I heard everything, and from them I understood as I saw. But not for this generation, but for a remote one, which is for to come." Here we are given a sense of what the book seeks to teach the reader, and shows us that Enoch, a righteous man, was to inherit the grand knowledge of what was to come on the day of tribulation, when all those who are wicked are to be removed. We are told that Enoch's eyes were opened by God himself, and through God choosing him, his eyes and ears were opened to the heavens. Enoch tells that he heard everything, and from that moment he understood everything that would come to pass. He adds that what he saw, however, was not meant for him and his generation, and that the day of tribulation, a period of worldwide strife, war, famine, pain, and suffering, and a precursor to the judgment of the wicked, was not something he or his people would ever see in their lifetime, but something that would come about for the generations after, a remote one, which had yet to happen. In the following chapters, those which appear to be merely a few lines long, tell us more of how the great time of tribulation will come to affect us. The Holy Great One will come forth from his dwelling, and the eternal God will tread upon the earth, even on Mount Sinai, and appear from his camp, and appear in the strength of his might from the heavens of heavens. And all shall be smitten with fear, and the watchers shall quake, and great fear and trembling shall seize them unto the ends of the earth. Here we learn that God will descend from the heavens, and that he will appear on the earth everywhere, in every instance, even upon the heights of Mount Sinai. In a sense, this appearance will be undeniable and inescapable. Everyone will know of his emergence, and none will be able to dispute him. The text continues that all will be smitten with fear, implying that none will try to resist him, and that the Watchers, the angels who had betrayed God, as discussed in chapters 6 to 9 of the Book of Enoch, will also quake in the same fear. We understand that the Watchers were cast deep into the descents of the void in later chapters of Enoch, and that they can be heard by Enoch begging to God to be restored to their former glory, but that their prayers fall on deaf ears. The suggestion here in this passage that they will quake in fear suggests that they know they will not be forgiven, and demonstrates the power of God, that if even angels fear him, then mere humans ought to be terrified. However, the passage also indicates that the Watchers will be seized unto the ends of the earth, giving us a sense that they will be freed from their bonds, only to be pursued and punished, perhaps in a public spectacle, for man to witness the tremendous power of God. By this interpretation, seeing God tear apart an angel before one's eyes would surely dissuade any mortal from questioning his authority, and so it can be said that the fury of God would be on display during these times for all to see, not just as a punishment to the angels who had gone against him, but also as a caution to man. The chapter continues, "And the high mountains shall be shaken, and the high hills shall be made low, and shall melt like wax before the flame, and the earth shall be wholly rent in sunder, and all that is upon the earth shall perish, and there shall be a judgment upon all men." Here we learn that the mountains will be shaken, perhaps a hint that volcanoes would come to erupt, and that the high hills shall be made low, perhaps another hint that the landscape would be drastically reshaped by God's emergence. The environment is described as melting like wax before a flame, furthermore suggesting that nowhere will be safe from the wrath of God, and that there will be no hiding from him, for his very presence can melt matter. All upon the earth will perish, we are told, meaning that none are exempt from his judgment, and that there would very well be a judgment upon all men, regardless of their status. But with the righteous he will make peace, and will protect the elect, and mercy shall be upon them, and they shall belong to God, and they shall be prospered, and they shall be blessed, and he will help them all, and light shall appear to them, and he will make peace with them. This is another pretty self-explanatory part of the chapter that many will be familiar with. Essentially, if a person is righteous, then they will have nothing to fear, for God will spare them of the suffering he has planned for the sinners, and instead, they shall be blessed and guided. Instead of meeting some terrible end, they will be met with light, and peace will be made with them, presumably forever, considering their good nature upon the earth. Chapter 1 concludes with a foreboding promise to those who have not lived righteously, telling us, "And behold, he cometh with 10,000 of his holy ones to execute judgment upon all, and to destroy all the ungodly, and to convict all flesh, of all the works of their ungodliness which they have ungodly committed, and of all the hard things which ungodly sinners have spoken against him." So by this, one might say that God does not come to the earth alone during the end times, but that he comes with 10,000 of his holy ones, perhaps 10,000 of his angels, and that it is they who descend upon the mortals, executing judgment upon all who have lived wickedly. How this is done is not specified, but the mention of convicting flesh could imply that the angels do not scour the land with verbal reprimandings, but instead are to deliver God's vengeance by physically destroying the ungodly for their ungodly ways. Chapter 2 has Enoch proceed to urge man to observe everything that takes place upon the earth, and reminds readers to give heed to things that have taken place upon it, or to keep records of everything that comes to pass, and to take specific notice of how nothing on earth changes so drastically. It is believed here that he is referring to the seasons, and that during the summer and the winter, the earth is filled with water, and clouds and dew and rain lie upon it. He continues these observations into chapter 3, telling readers to take note of the trees in the winter, and that though they may appear withered and shed all their leaves, they will return to their former glory. He continues into chapter 4 that readers should observe the summer days, and how close the sun appears to the earth, and how we take shelter from the sun by seeking shelter in the shade. He adds that we should recognize that in some occasions the sun becomes so hot in the summer days that it becomes difficult to walk upon the ground in bare feet, for the surface becomes uncomfortably hot. By chapter 5, he adds that readers ought to take notice how the trees cover themselves with green leaves and bear fruit. All this might seem like random ramblings of a madman, and I suppose there would have been a more direct way to get his point across. But what Enoch is essentially trying to say, as he declares in chapter 5, is that everything that happens in the world, including the withering of the trees and their regrowth, the heat of the sun in the summer, and the sprouting of fruit on the trees, is because of God, and that readers should not forget that this is literally all of his doing, and therefore should not be taken for granted. And all his works go on thus from year to year forever, and all the tasks which they accomplish for him, and their tasks change not, but according as God hath ordained, so is it done. And behold how the sea and the rivers in like manner accomplish, and change not their tasks from his commandments. He goes on to say here that everything, even the very waves of the oceans, abide by God's intentions, and that everything in the world operates as he has created it. In essence, you might say that he wants people to recognize that everything in the world happens for a reason, and that God pretty much is behind every detail and decision, even the most minute. In the rest of chapter 5, Enoch turns his attention towards those who are sinners, and proceeds to detail not only their wrongs, but also what is going to happen to them. But ye have not been steadfast, nor done the commandments of the Lord, but ye have turned away and spoken proud and hard words with your impure mouths against his greatness. O ye hard-hearted, ye shall find no peace. Therefore shall ye execrate your days, and the years of your life shall perish, and the years of your destruction shall be multiplied in eternal execration, and ye shall find no mercy. Yet again, the idea that even speaking against God is a sin that is punishable, and that those who do will find no peace and instead be set to years of destruction, where no mercy will be found. Enoch also seeks to warn people against pride, or speaking proudly against God, for to do such a thing will earn you nothing but misery in the end. He continues that, in those days ye shall make your names an eternal execration unto all the righteous, and by you shall all who curse, curse, and by all the sinners and godless shall imprecate by you, and for you the godless there shall be a curse. Enoch takes his aim at the disbelievers and those who deny his God's existence, saying that they will be cursed, and that all who have taken God's name with insult shall also be cursed. Essentially, Enoch pretty much paints a bleak outlook for anyone who isn't a fan of the big man upstairs. For those who do support him though, well, as you might imagine, it's all roses and candy. He tells us at the end of chapter 5 here that, and all the righteous shall rejoice, and there shall be forgiveness of sins, and every mercy and peace and forbearance. There shall be salvation unto them, a goodly light. As we've seen from many other prophets in the Bible and other religious texts, the idea is pretty straightforward here. Stay on the righteous path and you'll be rewarded with eternal greatness and peace, where all of your sins and shortcomings will be forgiven, assuming one has yielded to God and is authentic in their worship. As if it wasn't abundantly clear enough already, Enoch decides to take aim at the sinners again, telling us, and for all of you sinners there shall be no salvation, but on you shall abide a curse. So yet again, if being torn apart by angels wasn't scary enough, sinners can also find themselves being cursed. Enoch continues to praise the elect, saying, but for the elect there shall be light and joy and peace, and they shall inherit the earth. And then there shall be bestowed upon the elect wisdom, and they shall all live and never again sin, either through ungodliness or through pride. But they who are wise shall be humble. So interestingly, Enoch gives some little tidbits here that aren't exactly detailed anywhere else. He tells us that yes, the elect will inherit joy and peace, but that they aren't actually brought up to heaven, but instead get to inherit the earth. He tells us that wisdom will be bestowed upon them, and that from that point onwards, they will live without ever sinning again, whether this be through ungodliness or through pride. The idea can be interpreted here that because God opens the eyes of the elect, they now know not to sin, and are no longer affected by temptation. Therefore, the earth becomes a place devoid of sin because the humans inhabiting it will do no harm to each other. However, it can also be interpreted that without the temptation of sin, God essentially removes their free will, and in a way, humans kind of become less human, in that they're now so wise that they operate on a near robotic level of kindness, purity, and humbleness. Some might say that this then becomes a perfect world, but then one must consider what such a world would look like without a balance of the imperfect. Enoch continues of the elect, "And they shall not again transgress, nor shall they sin all the days of their life, nor shall they die of anger or wrath, but they shall complete the number of the days of their life, and their lives shall be increased in peace, and the years of their joy shall be multiplied in eternal gladness and peace, all the days of their lives." Again, the idea here is that those righteous few who are left on the earth after all the sinners have been swept away will have their eyes open to greater wisdom, perhaps wisdom that we cannot perceive at this very moment, and so they simply will not sin ever again, for man is seemingly reprogrammed with a new sense of morality, one that perhaps cannot be understood by us in our current consciousness. Perhaps it is the sight of the angels storming through earth, or the sheer presence of this God, that awakens a new state in us, and pretty much scares us into never doing a bad thing ever again. Or maybe, as mentioned, God literally does partially remove free will, and prevents man from succumbing to temptation. Enoch continues that man will not have to fear dying early, or that the world will exist without murder or calamity, meaning no one will have their finite lot cut short. In this, they can rest easy knowing that no harm can come to them in this new earth, and that because of this, their joy will be multiplied. Whilst Enoch does paint a compelling picture of what he believes are the things to come, he certainly does not paint a reassuring one. Perhaps this is the point, a deliverance of a foreboding message that is convincing enough to change people's behaviour for the betterment of mankind. After all, the sentiment behind his message is one we are all quite familiar with. Do good and one might be rewarded. Do bad and one will be punished. Enoch uses such hyperboles to represent moral order and seeks to establish his God as a way in which to achieve this, illustrating a vivid enough idea that captivates readers and leads them to ponder on which reality they would rather live in, eternal peace or eternal suffering. His predictions of the good inheriting the earth also echoes the statements of Jesus in Matthew 5:5. "Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth." And through this, believers might say that Enoch's ideas are validated, given that many of his sentiments correlate with that of other prophets, who are prominently featured in the Standard Bible. But let me know your thoughts on Enoch and the first 5 chapters of this highly captivating book. In the next episode, we'll be revisiting the fall of the Watchers and what Enoch describes as the birth of the Nephilim and the corruption of man. As always guys, if you've enjoyed today's video, then don't forget to give this one a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe for more content just like this. Until next time.